So we're in the Glenavon Hotel in Cookstown, and this is Rosemary from Juvela. So what's your official title?
I'm a freelance home economist. So
home
I work for Juvela, mainly doing cooking demonstrations like this, very much in the UK. I travel all around the country in the UK, and I come over and help Orla 2 or 3 times a year. And we do cooking demonstrations in the whole of Northern Ireland. I was here in June doing one in Derry, and last night we were in Belfast at the Tyrone Hotel. This evening we're here in Cookstown. This is the first time we've been to Cookstown. We've been to Glenavon before, but we had lots of new patients come to see us this evening, and I hope they found it beneficial knowing about Juvela.
Excellent. And what are the dishes that you're cooking this evening?
Okay, so I did a gingerbread, a sticky gingerbread. I made a Swiss roll, which we made into a chocolate log. It's very seasonal, coming up to Christmas. I did a pizza, which uses a yeasted dough mix. We always make pastry on cookery demonstrations, and this evening I made the pastry into a chicken or a turkey pie, something you could use leftover turkey at Christmas. And very finally I made a spicy pasta dish using chorizo, sausage and tomatoes.
Excellent. Sounds delicious. So we're going to see some of those dishes now, and then we'll come back afterwards. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
See you again.
Okay, thank you.
I think everybody, everybody apart from a couple of people that came in once we started, I hope you've all had a chance to try the sticky gingerbread cake that we had over there, yes? And I hope you'd enjoyed it. So actually, that's one of the first recipes that I'd like to make. And it's towards the end of this recipe book, in fact it's on page 18. Okay, so now, you can all hear me, I'm sure, because I've got the mic on. If you actually can't see what I'm doing, quite often I'm filmed and you can see me on the screen. But what I'm going to do this evening is just show you. So if anybody wants to stop me and say, you know, can I have a look or whatever, and that's absolutely fine, please do that. So what I've got here is in the saucepan I've got, and I'll just double check the recipes because this is very new, one of the first times I've made it. We've got 7 ounces of soft margarine, which I've actually got in the saucepan, and to that I'm going to add 4 ounces of soft brown sugar, and I'm going to add some syrup. Now before I go any further, I'm actually talking in ounces. Would you prefer that I talked in grams? No. Well, I ask the same question every time I do a cooking demonstration, and I always get exactly the same answer. Do you know how long we've been metric? Along 40 years, 40 years. So it kind of reflects, you know, I know that goes back, that shows how old I am. But sometimes when it comes to baking, sometimes it's just easier to refer to things in ounces. But some of the younger ones amongst us may prefer the metric. And so we always say when we do baking that 25 grams is the same as 1 ounce. So for baking measurements, 25 grams is 1 ounce. So it's much easier then to multiply it up. So if you're doing 7 ounces, then that's 175 grams. Okay, and I needed 4 ounces of sugar, so that's 100 grams. So it's fine, it doesn't matter. And in fact, in our recipe books, we're always very correct, and we give you the metric measurement first, followed by the imperial measurement. All I'd say is follow whichever one you prefer, but just be consistent in the recipe. So I'm going to add also now some golden syrup, and you want 7 ounces, which is about a half a bottle of syrup. So it's always difficult, isn't it, to measure golden syrup because it's very, very sticky. But the best way is one of these squeezy bottles. And you just want to squeeze that in there like that. And I'm going to melt those ingredients all together. So this is a recipe, possibly not for one of us on a diet, but it's really quite nice. It's seasonal. coming up to Christmas, and it does make quite a lot. Let me just show you, take these ingredients off. I'm going to make it in this square tin. This is one of those flexible silicone tins, so it's really easy to turn out at the end. But this is sufficient mixture to make at least 16 quite big squares, you know, so that kind of makes it better, does it, with the ingredients. So whenever you're using a silicone tin, always be careful and put it onto a solid baking sheet, because just be careful here that the butter and the sugar don't burn. Because if you put the mixture in here, which is going to be quite runny, it's very difficult to actually put it into the oven if it's not on a solid sheet. So you can melt the butter and the syrup and sugar in the microwave if you prefer, or you can do it as I'm doing it in a pan. Just keep your eye on it. So meanwhile, in the bowl, I'm going to use some of our mix. And we've got two mixes at Juvela. I'm sure you're familiar with these. We've got a white mix and a fibre mix. They're flour mixes, but they're gluten-free flour mixes. And it's just like having a bag of flour in the cupboard, because we say it's an all-purpose mix. You can use it for all of your baking needs. So I'm going to actually make the gingerbread with it. I'm going to make a Swiss roll. I'm going to make some pastry. I'm going to make some bread dough. You can use it for scones and biscuits and white sauce and Yorkshire pudding. Everything. It's all you're baking. It's like a self-raising flour. And so we do just a white one, which is a white one, self-raising flour, and we do the fibre one, which is like a brown flour. And the only difference is that this one's got added sugar beet fibre to it, which gives it that the crunchy, nutty flavour of a brown flour. Now with the gingerbread, with the recipe, actually suggests that you can either use the white mix or the fibre mix. Personally, I prefer to use the fibre mix because I think it's more like traditional gingerbread, and it's got that nutty flavour. So I've got 9 ounces of fibre mix, which just pop in there. Up to one side. And to that, I'm remembering the ingredients here. I think it's a teaspoonful of bicarbonate of soda. So when we make gingerbread, we always tend to add bicarbonate of soda, and it helps to give it that sticky texture. So I've got one of these measuring spoons, which is really quite good as well, especially when you're adding baking powder or bicarb to the mixture. And as well, I've got some ginger, and I want 2 teaspoons of ginger. And you can never get the spoon in, so it's just a case of kind of hoping that you've got the right amount and guessing. That's 2 teaspoons of ginger. It doesn't matter if you've got a little too much ginger, or in fact the mixed spice, or half a teaspoon of mixed spice. But with things like baking powder and bicarb, you need to make sure you've got the right ingredients. Okay, so we've got that in the bowl here, and I've got some milk, and that's 7 fluid ounces of milk and 2 eggs. We always use medium eggs at Juvela. All the recipes, when we use an egg, it will always be a medium egg unless we suggest otherwise. I think all the recipes have got medium eggs. Where did that go? Still got the yolk in it. Fell straight into the milk. So just put the eggs in the milk, and I'm just going to whisk those lightly together. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just add the melted fat and sugars to the fibre flour and stir that together. It's quite a runny mixture, so just give it a good stir. Those of you can probably smell, can you smell the ginger smell now? And I'm going to actually add then just the eggs and milk too. I find that it's easier to do it this way. If you add it all together, if you add the liquid the milk and the eggs and the fat and the sugar, then it's a little bit more difficult to incorporate. Whereas if you do it 2 separate stages, then it's easier to mix them. Literally, that's it. And we just need now to pour this mixture into the tin. I have just baselined the tin with a piece of greaseproof paper, again just to help it turn out when it's baked. And that's it. And that bakes for 30 minutes at 160, gas mark 3, and well, I haven't got any to show you because actually I've cut it all up for you to try, but there is some still over there. If any of you want to have another taste at the end, we weren't able to taste before. It's really nice, as I say, it cuts up this into 16, at least 16 squares. I think for Christmas time it's really rather nice if you want to make a glacé icing to put on the top. If you get a jar of crystallised ginger, if you actually make the glacé icing with some of the syrup from the ginger, and then you cut up the crystallised ginger and scatter it on the top. It's a really nice Christmassy cake that you can have. And it freezes exceptionally well as well, and because you freeze it, and it actually combines the flavours, and it really tastes quite nice when you take it out of the freezer, so it doesn't affect the flavour at all. And what I find I do is I make a different cake each week, and I keep 2 or 3 pieces out to eat now, and then I put the rest in the freezer, and so then I have lots of different cakes. We have a lemon drizzle cake, or I have a Victoria sandwich, and so I can then take out what I fancy, you know, rather than finding that I've completely fed up of gingerbread because I've eaten the whole thing, and then the next week make another cake. So it's rather nice to mix and match and make a different cake and pop them in the freezer. So I'm going to give that to somebody and to pop it in the kitchen. Fortunately, we're not able to bake things off this evening, but I have got one I've seen earlier. And the next recipe I should like to move on to is some pastry. Always when we do a cookery demonstration at Juvela, we always make pastry. People seem to struggle a little bit making pastry. Have we got some good pastry makers here this evening? You make pastry at home? Yeah? No? Somebody else? Yes? Good, good. Okay, so the recipe for the pastry is on page 13. And the recipe that in the book is a courgette, mushroom and mozzarella tart, and it's actually got the ingredients for the pastry. I'm not going to make that tart. I'm actually going to make a chicken pie, or a cookie pie. Again, thinking of coming up to Christmas, we've always got wondering what to do with it, turkey that we've got left over on Boxing Day and the day after. So making the pastry, actually just going to quickly show you how, so very easily you can make it into a savoury pie. But once you've made pastry, you can obviously use it to make lots of different recipes and quiches and lots of different sweet and savoury ideas. So if you want to follow the recipe for the pastry, I'm going to use the white mix for this, and I'm going to take 8 ounces or 200 grams of the white mix and pop that in the bowl. And to that I'm going to add the fat. Now I think this is where a lot of people go wrong when they make pastry, and they say, well, I can't roll it out, and I had to roll it out between 2 pieces of cling film, you know, because I can't handle it. And it's possibly because they didn't use the correct fats. So always when we make pastry, we always use hard fat. And traditionally, the best pastry was made with half margarine and half lard. If you don't want to use lard, that's absolutely fine, use all margarine. Or now coming up to Christmas, you want to make some mince pies and they want to be extra special, you can use butter, but always use hard block butter. If you start to make pastry with the soft margarines, you will struggle to handle it. You would struggle if you were making pastry with traditional flour, if you were using the soft fats, because they're designed to spread easily and therefore they're a lot softer. So as I say, I'm using half margarine and half lard, and because I'm using 8 ounces of flour, I'm actually using 4 ounces of fat, and so that's 2 ounces of margarine and 2 ounces of lard. Now what I do is, because I only actually use the hard fats to make pastry, I buy a block of stork from the supermarket and a block of lard, and I take 2 ounces out of each, and of course I'm left with the rest. Well, if I put it in the fridge, then actually I might find it 2 or 3 weeks later and think, oh, I'm not so sure about this, and it'll end up in the bin. So what I do is I actually cut each block of, which is 8 ounces, into 4 lots. I use one lot to make pastry, and then the others I wrap up into foil in 4-ounce blocks and pop them in the freezer. And then when I come to make pastry like tonight, I just take one of those foil blocks out, and it's all weighed out and ready to go. And I've not wasted it, and it makes it a lot easier.
Would you use cooking lard?
I actually, no, I just use lard. So you can get something like Trex or something like that, but you can use that, but I actually just use Sainsbury's or Tesco's lard. But it does, a lot of people say, oh, I don't like using lard, and I don't use it for anything else other than making pastry. You would use cooking, that's absolutely fine. That's just fine, you can do that. But it still frees really very well, unless you use it, of course, for other things. So you just rub the fats into the flour mix until it resembles breadcrumbs, and I just shake the bowl and any big lumps come to the top, and then you can just deal with those as well. Now this mixture is very similar obviously to a crumble mix, and well, you can tell that I'm not local. I've come across from Yorkshire today to do the cookery demonstration. We were in Belfast yesterday and here this evening. In Yorkshire we like our puddings. Do you like your puddings here? So I like to have something on hand, in case I feel like a pudding in the evening. And so often when I'm making pastry, I actually double up the ingredients, and because now I've got a crumble mix. And sometimes then, if I'm going to do that, I might actually use margarine, or I might use just all butter for making a crumble mix. And what I do now, having doubled up, is I take half of it out and pop it in a plastic bag and add a couple of tablespoons of sugar, and then I put that bag in the freezer. Now, I'm talking about my freezer is quite a big freezer. Your nice big freezer that you can put things in. But, and then I've got it there. And so then I can either have some fresh fruit or some tinned fruit or some frozen fruit. And I just go and take a couple of tablespoons of my crumble mix, and you can pop into the oven with whatever I'm making for tea. So it's really quite easy to do. So it's just an idea there that you can use. So, back to the pastry. There, we've got it rubbed in now. And now what I'm going to do is add an egg. Now, this is where it differs from traditional pastry. We do find an egg helps with the texture of the pastry. So I'm just going to break that egg in and quickly mix it in with the blade of a knife. And, well, it's quite warm in here and my hands are warm, and I could quite easily pour this mixture together without any additional water. It would be very short, and it would be like shortbread to handle. So always with the pastry, we always add the water, and we do suggest that for 8 ounces of flour, you add 2 tablespoons of water. But I'm going to add those just a tablespoon at a time, and I'm going to use my hand just to pull the mixture together, just so that I can see how moist it is. We've all been in a situation, I'm sure, where we've added too much water, and then we think, oh no, it's really sticky, what am I going to do? Never mind, I'll add a bit more flour. Oh, it's a bit too dry, I'll add a bit more water, and before you know where you are, you haven't got pastry at all. So, just adding a tablespoon at a time. And again, I do measure it, because it's easy to know exactly how much you've added. And you can see now that it's starting to come together, and I can just help it along there. Squeeze it. And by using your hand, it's much better than perhaps using a fork or a knife, because you've got a much better feel on what's happening to the mixture. Can you see now? It's coming together. It is quite sticky, and it's quite coarse. What I'm going to do now is do something that you wouldn't do with traditional pastry. Because with traditional pastry, they say you handle it as little as possible. But Juvela pastry likes to be handled and kneaded. And what I'm going to do is a sticky, coarse mixture, just a little bit of mix on a board, not a lot, and I'm just going to very quickly knead the pastry in that mix, and it just changes texture and it becomes quite smooth, not anywhere near as sticky, and it's just the right texture now to roll out and use. Okay, so you form it into a ready to use. And I always try to keep one hand relatively clean, and I can put my fingers through this and they're not sticky at all. And so that's where you want to be. If you get really sticky fingers, then you need to knead it a little longer in a little more mix before you can start to handle it. Some people say, oh, you know, should I put it in the fridge and let it chill a little? Well, yes, you can do that, but really it's not necessary. I find that I actually can use it straight away. So what I'm going to do is just a little more mix on the board. And I've just got a sandwich tin, so this is quite large. I'm thinking now of using my turkey up after Christmas. But you can use smaller tins. It's quite nice to use actually a metal tin rather than one of the porcelain quiche dishes or something like that. They look very nice, but the metal transfers the heat much better to cook the pastry underneath. Quite often I use foil containers, the disposable foil containers, and they transfer the heat really well. So I'm going to take a good half of the pastry to start with, just form it into a bowl, ready to roll. So when you're rolling the pastry, you just want to lightly roll and turn the board through a quarter turn. I've got a slippy tablecloth here, and this is moving on it, so it's not like your work surface at home, you see, where everything stays still. So a little more mix on the rolling pin if it starts to stick, but you want to pick the pastry up and give it a quarter turn and just roll it a little bit further. And by doing this, by picking it up and moving it around, you're checking that it's not actually sticking to the board. And also you're rolling in a different direction. So just pick it up and turn it around. And we want to roll this out so that it's large enough to go into this tin, a little bit longer. And this is one of these flexible mats, so it's quite good. I can pick that up and turn it around. And I think that's probably about big enough. Now how do you get the pastry from there to here? Oh, the rolling pin. So you put the rolling pin in the middle and very carefully pick the pastry up, roll it over, turn the rolling pin, and you can pick it up. Okay, and then once you do that, you can then carefully unroll the pastry into the tin and then just drop it down. With the back of your finger, you can just place it into the tin. And don't worry, if there are any holes, you can easily patch them up. You all do that at home, don't you? Yeah. We ran a pastry workshop a little while ago, and we were amazed at how many people wanted to come and make pastry. And so we said to everybody, okay, you can't go home unless you put the pastry over the rolling pin. Well, everybody did go home. Okay, so they all managed it, so it's not difficult. So just trimming off the excess pastry there. Okay, and we'll just pull that together. And I'm just going to make the lid. Put that to one side. So I'll just take the rest of the pastry and just, with the trimmings, pull that together. And again, a bit more mix. If you start off with the shape that you want to finish off with, So if you make it round before you start, and then again, just lightly roll it, pick it up, quarter turn. Try, and that way it also keeps its shape as well, so you don't get a peculiar shaped piece of pastry that won't fit anything. Sticking a little bit there, so that's no worries. Just a little bit of mix on the pin. Okay, I think that's large enough. I'm just going to pop that to one side. And I'll just quickly make the filling. So, well, okay, I've got some chicken from Sainsbury's ready cooked, but this is turkey, okay? This is left over from your Christmas dinner. But as I say, you can use anything. You can make a meat pie, vegetable pie, a quiche. We quite often make quiches. Or, of course, you can do the recipe that we suggest in the book. We've got lots of recipes on our website, different quiche ideas. And just rinse my hands. Okay. I'm really cheating now because to my turkey I'm actually going to, instead of making a white sauce with some Juvela mix and some milk, I'm actually cheating. I'm using a jar of, this is Dolmio white lasagna sauce. I don't know whether any of you have used this. This is, obviously it's gluten free, and it's just so easy because you can just add it to the turkey in the bowl, mix it up. I've used about 3/4 of the jar there, and I'm just going to literally put that mixture in there, quick and easy. You have the jar of sauce on in your cupboard, you see, after Christmas, and hey presto, off you go. And of course, if you're making this, you can add some mushrooms as well. So you can make a chicken and mushroom pie. And so, and if you want to use a little more sauce, I like to have a chicken pie that's got plenty of sauce in it, and you don't want it to be too dry. Just pop that there. And I'll take the pastry we've rolled out earlier, again, over the pin, pick it up, take the pie, and then just carefully unroll that over the top, and I'm just very quickly press it down and trim it off. Quick and easy, yes. So very, very easy to handle. And I've used all the pastry actually to make this pie. As I say, it's quite a large pie, but if you wanted to make some smaller ones, it will make probably 4 or 5 smaller pies. And again, you can keep one to eat now, and you can put the rest in the freezer, because this recipe would freeze really well as well, and then you can just take it out and leave it to thaw and cook it from there. And if you were making a quiche or the recipe in the book, again, if you want to roll the pastry out, while you've got your flour and your rolling pin and everything out, just roll it out and then freeze it. I make pastry cases in little containers, put them in the freezer again, and then you can just go and take one out and fill it with whatever you've got, and you're ready to go. So it's thinking ahead, isn't it, to kind of bring the changes, make some different recipe ideas for meal times. So I've just pressed around with my thumb. You can use a fork if you prefer. I'll just take some scissors, which are over here, and I'm just going to cut 2 or 3 air holes in the top. And so we have the chicken pie that will bake in a hot oven, 200 degrees centigrade or gas mark sticks, for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, until the pastry is golden brown and the chicken and the sauce are thoroughly heated through. So there we've got the chicken pie. Okay, so we'll move these things away. Clear flex a little bit. Still remaining messy with my hands. I'm going to move on to, well, the recipe is similar to the one which you see on the front cover of your recipe book. This one is on page 12. Its recipe is 3 cheese and rocket flatbread. Now, it's kind of similar to a pizza. It's a pizza dough and it's folded over with the 3 different kinds of cheese to make something similar to a calzone, yes, that you can get. But what I thought I'd do is actually, it's the ingredients that I'm going to use to make the dough is exactly the same as one that you would use to make a pizza. Do you manage to get the pizza bases on prescription? We have Juvela pizza bases. Do you get them on prescription? Do you like them? Yeah? Do you know these? Yes? Yeah? Well, this recipe is so easy to make, and to make your own bread dough, and then you can put on top of it what you want, and you can use it to make the pizza, or in fact to make that flatbread, which you can make a focaccia, you can make garlic bread, you can do lots of different things. But I wanted to show you just how easy it was to make a pizza dough. Got all the ingredients here. And again, it's using the white mix. And I just wanted to show you how versatile the white mix is, because the fibre mix, I've already made a part of made some pastry. When you open a box of our mixes, you always find a sachet of yeast. Yeast. And the yeast is there in case you want to make bread with the mix. Does anybody here make their own bread? Yeah? Do you make it by hand or do you make it in a bread maker? Both. Yeah, okay. I think when you use a bread maker, I make it in a bread maker, and well, I'm going to eat more of it. I actually put it on so it's ready in the morning, and then you come down to the smell of fresh baked bread. But we've got recipes on the back to make the bread and those by hand, and we have a recipe book as well for making bread in a bread maker. And the only thing I suggest say that if you buy a bread maker to make bread, gluten-free bread, always follow the recipe, the product that you're using, rather than perhaps the instruction book for your bread maker may have a gluten-free bread recipe. You don't know what product they use when they use Juvela or one of our competitors. So always follow the recipe from us, which is on the back of the pack, or as I say, we have the recipe books for bread making. So, to make the pizza base and flatbread, and again it's exactly the same recipe that you see on page 12 there. I've got 10 ounces, or 250 grams of white mix. And to that I'm going to add just a teaspoonful of yeast. I'm going to make this a lot thicker dough than if you were making it into bread rolls. So just a teaspoonful of yeast. And I want a tablespoon of oil, and I'm using just some sunflower oil. And some water, and that's it really. And I've got 5 to 6 fluid ounces of water. The temperature of the water is really important. If it's too hot, then it will kill the yeast. If it's too cold, it doesn't matter, it just takes a little bit longer for the bread to prove. But if it's too hot, just be careful, because your bread won't rise. I find that I actually put half boiling water and top it up with cold water to the required level, and that's usually just about the right temperature. If you put your finger up in, it should be what we call blood heat, so it should just feel warm. This water's been sitting here for a little while, so it's gone quite cold, but that doesn't matter because, as I say, it'll just take a little bit longer to brew. So I'm going to add about 3/4 of the water to start with and mix it together. Again, you don't want to add too much and find that it's difficult to handle, so just a little bit more. And I tend to also mix it with my hand because then I can feel just exactly what's going on in the bowl. And if it's a little bit too dry, a little more water. You'll find that different flours accept more different amounts of water. So if you were making this with the fibre mix and you were making a brown one, then you'll find that actually the fibre mix does take more liquid because of the added fibre and it absorbs more. Okay, so it pulls together. I mean, it's so easy. That's as easy and as quick as it is. And again, a little more mix on the board. And I'm just going to knead that together. It's smooth. So you see, it's almost as quick as opening a pizza base packet. Yeah? You don't agree? The children will enjoy this. I'm looking at you'd probably like to make this, wouldn't you? And that's it. So, I've got the dough, and now I can use it to make what I want. I can make a pizza, I can make the flatbread, you can make the calzone, you can make a focaccia bread. With the focaccia bread, you just take the dough here, and I just put some olive oil on it, and perhaps some rosemary, and some garlic or whatever, and I just punch holes like that along the top, and leave it to prove, and I've got focaccia bread. So it's a dough that's very, very versatile. You can use it for lots of different things. So with the flatbread recipe, I would roll it out to a rectangle like this, and on half of it I put different kinds of cheese. So with the recipe it actually uses Parmesan, cheddar and a blue cheese. They suggest Gorgonzola, but you can use Stilton if you wish. Any kind of blue cheese, and particularly at Christmas you might have some Stilton left over and wonder perhaps what to do with it, so there's a recipe. And then you just fold over the top and seal the edges, leave it to proof and to bake it. It's really nice as an accompaniment to salad or soups, it's really good. But for quickness, I just wanted to show you then that to make this into a pizza base, I don't have a pizza ring with me actually, I just have a baking sheet, but I'm just going to lightly roll it out so that it's a circle. They've given me these tablecloths, but she said, oh, they're wipeable, and they're slippy as well, so. Okay, so the wonderful thing about the dough is that it's quite easy to pull it into whatever shape you want, so you keep it as circular as you can. And you can put whatever topping you've got. Now, I hope that perhaps earlier you were also able to taste our bread rolls, which we just put on some chutney. So I've got it's Baxter's classic tomato chutney here, and this is gluten-free as well, and I'm just going to do exactly the same then as I did on the rolls, and just pop the chutney on the top. You can, I'm sure you're experts at making pizzas, but you can put all sorts of things on, including pesto. I don't know whether you put on some pesto. You can use the green pesto or the tomato pesto is very, very nice on top of the pizza. And then, of course, you can put on top of that any ingredients you wish. I'm going to write my hands in it. Okay, so I've got some ham, some cooked ham. Just be careful when you buy ham that you don't buy it with a breaded rind or anything like that. And well, quickness, I'm just going to cut this into strips. You can use the Parma ham, prosciutto. I'm going to use some chorizo later, but you can put chorizo on it. You can put all sorts of different things on the pizza base. just sprinkle the ham. I think when you're making your own pizza base, you actually put a lot more toppings on it than you may have got elsewhere. And I've got some mozzarella cheese. Just drain that. And I'm going to just pull chunks of that, pop that on the top. Now, with a pizza base like this, you can bake it straight away. It doesn't need to prove, because it'll be fine. This will be more of a flatbread pizza. If you want it to be more like a deep pan pizza, then you'd leave it to prove for 10-15 minutes. And also doing this, you can actually make a stuffed crust pizza, because what you can do is actually roll it a little bit thinner around the edges and put some cheese around and then roll the edges over, so you can have like a stuffed crust pizza as well. You know, all of these things, you see, you're able to do if you actually make your own pizza base. So I've got a few tomatoes as well that I can pop on. And if you've got some peppers, you may want to add some peppers. And I've got some olives too. One or two black olives there. And so, just unfortunately, I don't know that we've got the ovens on now that we can cook this, but you can get the idea, can't you? Maybe a quick and easy pizza. Very versatile, really, the bread dough, in that you can use it to make lots of different things. I've actually got here the flatbread. And you can get an idea up there that when it comes out of the oven, obviously you heat it hot and the cheese would melt. I made this yesterday, so obviously, it's just to look at, to get the idea. But that's what the flatbread looks like when it's baked as well. The recipe on the front cover. So I'm going to do something sweet again now, and some of you I know tried the Swiss roll earlier on, so I'd like to show you the recipe for the Swiss roll. And that recipe again, it's at the back of the book, and that's on page 19, the Swiss roll. Now, has anybody made a gluten-free Swiss roll? No? I'm not aware of you've been able to buy gluten-free Swiss roll in the shops, but I haven't actually seen one myself. But I want to show you just how easy it is. Now, a long time ago, I used to work for British Gas, and we used to make Swiss rolls then. Swiss roll is made with what we call a whisk sponge, or a fatless sponge. It's just with eggs and sugar and flour, the Juvela mix. Those are the 3 ingredients that you need. But what you've got to do is whisk the eggs and the sugar together till they're really thick and creamy, and that gives you the air to make the Swiss roll rise. When I used to work for British Gas, we used to use this method I'm going to show you now. We used to call it the high-speed gas method, okay? Because actually normally it takes quite a long time to beat the eggs and the sugar together. So this is a long time ago I'm talking about now, but it still holds true to now. What you've got to do is separate the eggs as if you were making a meringue. So you put the whites in the bowl and the egg yolks in a dish. Are you all good separating eggs? No? Just kind of break the egg in half and transfer the yolk from one half of the shell to the other. If, for any reason, you get any egg yolk in the egg white, you'll find it very difficult to whisk. And you need a very clean bowl as well to whisk the egg whites, otherwise they won't incorporate the air. If you get any egg yolk in with the egg white, the best way to get it out is actually to use a piece of the shell. It acts like a magnet and somehow manages to get the egg yolk out. So now, normally at home I would use a hand mixer, but they're very noisy. So I'm going to have a lot of exercise with my hand. And I'm using this very old-fashioned method of using a hand whisk. And what you want to do is whisk the egg whites really, really well until they double in volume, like as if you were making them around. So just give them a good old whisk. And they should form peaks in the bowl. Keep changing hands to get exercise in both arms, really. Okay, it's coming. Okay, we're very nearly there. Now you should be able to, just a minute or two longer, because that's always the test. You should be able to pick the bowl up and turn it upside down, okay? So when you've done that, then you know that there's sufficient air in the mix. And I'm not just doing that because I'm showing you here today, I'm doing it, I actually do it at home. My husband's sitting over there, no problem. I do this at home because that shows that actually you've got sufficient air in the mix to actually stick to the bowl. And at home I do it in a pirate's bowl, I don't do it in a plastic bowl, and it's exactly the same. So then all you do quickly is just pop in the egg yolks that we separated from the 3 eggs, and some sugar, and I think that's 5 ounces of sugar, and then very quickly just whisk them back up again to incorporate it. And so as quick as that, you've got that thick creamy mixture with the eggs and the sugar that it probably would have taken you at least 5 or 10 minutes if you were actually trying to beat the eggs with the sugar. So it really is a quick way of doing it. And that's the basis now for the Swiss roll. And I think in the recipe books it will say until it leaves a trail behind the whisk. And there you've got it. And so all that I have to do now is to fold in the flour. And of course we've got to do that quite gently because we don't want to knock out all of that air that we put in. And so I've got 5 ounces of the white mix. And I'm going to use one of these plastic spatulas, and very carefully, this is something that you mustn't rush. You must just very lightly fold the flour into the egg. And again, the recipes sometimes say that you do it in a figure of 8 motion. But just cut and stir until all of that mix is incorporated. And the last thing you want in the Swiss roll is to come across a lump of flour that you've not mixed in. Okay. So I've got the Swiss roll tin, so that's just quite a large Swiss roll tin. And what I'm going to do is, looking for my water, is just damp the Swiss roll tin with some water. I don't use grease because this is a fatless sponge that we don't want to add grease. Just a piece of greaseproof paper, and if you just damp the tin, you You see the greaseproof paper sticks to it, okay? So that just helps when you put the mixture in. Again, just check, if you're using a Pyrex bowl, it's quite good, because when you add the flour, it's quite heavy on the eggs and the sugar, and it will drop to the bottom. So you can just peek underneath and make sure that everything's all mixed in. And then we just tip out the mixture, and I tend to put it all down the centre of the tin. It's not too easy to spread this into the sides of the tin, so you've got to let it find its own way. These plastic spatulas are splendid for getting all the mixture out. Put it in the tin. And so what I find I tend to do now is kind of put my fingers down on that paper and just tip the tin and allow the mixture to go into the corners. Okay, because you'll find that you're trying to spread it, and if you spread it, it's kind of difficult to move, and you're also losing the air. You want to handle it as little as possible. Can you see it moving? So it goes down to the corners, and then down to this corner. This is why I damped the tin so that the greaseproof paper sticks. Okay, can you see that? So because it's got no fat in it, so therefore how it goes into the oven will how it can come out. So you don't want to have one end of the Swiss roll really thick and the other end very fine. So you want it all to be equal. So that's the best way, and just to level it off. And I tend to drop it onto the table to burst any surface air bubbles. And that now will go into a hot oven just for 10 minutes. Again, it's a shame that I'm not able to show you that because of the hotel kitchen. But what you need to do when it goes into the oven, you need to get yourself prepared. So you want to take a piece of greaseproof paper and put it down, and get your jam ready. So that when the Swiss roll comes out, you can turn it out straight away. Of course, it's got a piece of greaseproof paper on the bottom, so it will just drop out onto your prepared piece of greaseproof paper. If you get the jam, make sure it's quite solid, your jam, make sure it's warmed a little so that it will spread easily on the top of the Swiss roll. And then take a knife and just mark, but not cut, just mark the Swiss roll about an inch, a couple of centimetres in from the end. And then using the paper as a guide, it's difficult to show you here, but this is the way. Using the paper as a guide, you just start off the Swiss roll, and you just pick the paper up, and the Swiss roll will roll out to the end of the paper. Like that. It's very easy to do, really is. Just go, and then you see, you get the roll. And I tend to leave it like that on the cooling rack for half an hour or so to leave it to go cool. So, some of you were able to try. There is a little more, I think, left over there. But I just thought, as we're coming up to Christmas, a little more seasonal, that I'd make the Swiss roll into a chocolate log for you this evening. And I'm going to be trying to be very quick anyway. So you take the Swiss roll, pop it down the centre there of the board. And again, I'm really cheating. I bought some of this. Have you used this before? Betty Crocker chocolate icing. So they do a buttercream, a white buttercream, and a chocolate buttercream, and this is chocolate fudge icing. And what I'm going to do is just spread this over the top of the Swiss roll to make it into a chocolate log. Now, I'm doing it really quickly here for you this evening, and you'll be able to spend a lot longer doing it. But just spread that over the roll. And you probably will use the whole tub. But again, it's Christmas and we're not counting calories, are we? Okay. So you want to just spread that over and put some on the ends. To cover all of the cake. We've done that end. So with the this little bit there, with the knife, you can just run the knife on the top, so it resembles a log. And if you want, you can actually make some white icing, you know, and put it on around the end of the roll. But I think that just marking it with a knife is sufficient. And well, I've got a robin, make it seasonal, so we'll pop the robin on there. And I've got some holly leaves that you can buy as decoration. These were from Tesco's. Okay, so very, very quickly, there you've got a chocolate log with a Swiss roll. So it gives you an idea what you can do at Christmas.
So I'm back in the kitchen, and a big thank you to Juvela for the invitation to come along to their cooking demo. They run those demos quite often, so have a look at their website and see where the nearest one to you is. And thanks again to Rosemary and Orla. Rosemary gave the demonstration and she took you through all the lovely recipes. They have a great book on the Juvela website of recipes. You can download them there, have a look at some of the videos and photos. There are links at the end of the video for the Juvela website and the Juvela channel on YouTube, so have a look at those. They're well worth a browse. Back in the kitchen we've made the Swiss roll from the demo. So this has turned out lovely, and there are all different methods for making Swiss rolls, but Rosemary's was particularly good. It's very easy. You get the meringue made first and then just whisk in the egg yolks and the sugar, so it's very quick and very simple. I've chopped the end of it off. You always cut the ends of it off just to make it look nice. If you look at the other end, that's the raw end as such, so we would slice that off to make it tidy. But if you're going to cover it in chocolate, slice an end off, turn it round and press it against the side. And then when you cover it in chocolate, you can have a little stick, a little bit of your log branch sticking out as well. So you need a little bit more chocolate, and we'll get that covered up and turned into a nice Christmas log. But even as it is, I filled it with cream, just some double cream whipped up, make it nice and thick, and filled it in, and it's turned out lovely. So I'm looking forward to having that later. So again, thank you very much to Orla. You won't have seen her, she was working away in the background, and she kindly invited me along, and for Rosemary for coming all the way over from Yorkshire. So we'll see them again, and do check out their videos and their recipes. And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week, and do send in your comments and ideas for videos and anything you'd like to see. And don't forget to join us on our social channels. We've had photos going up all this week. There's a lot of preparations for Christmas, so check Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter and Facebook for our photographs to see what's coming up. So thank you, and we'll see you again next week.